Hello friends, and welcome to Figure Study, where we appreciate the form in Transformers. Today, oddly enough, I'm taking a look at Power of the Prime's Rippersnapper. And the reason why I say oddly enough is because I actually have no intention whatsoever of getting Abominus from Power of the Primes, because I've already got Orden, and Orden is vastly superior. I mean, nothing against Power of the Prime's Abominus. I think it's great to have options, and with some upgrade kits, I think it could actually look pretty darn cool, but I've already got my version of Abominus. I don't need another. That said, I actually like Rippersnapper and Blot and Hunger as standalone figures, at least from what I've seen. I don't actually have Blot yet, but yeah, this is cool. I'm actually very into this, even as just a standalone figure. I mean, he can still turn into a leg, he can still turn into an arm. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to cover those modes, because like I said, I have no intention of getting Abominus, so I don't really need to worry about that stuff. And besides, there are so many videos available that cover Power of the Prime's Abominus. Y'all really don't need me to do it too. So, in a kind of bizarre twist, at least when it comes to me, because I generally don't have nostalgia for a lot of these figures, because I'm more just all about the toy as it is now, I actually do have nostalgia for Rippersnapper. I never had Abominus growing up, but I did have a G1 Rippersnapper. Just Rippersnapper. Didn't have any of the others. But I did have the weird limbed shark guy, and he was a lot of fun for me to mess with. Mostly because as I was growing up, I had this weird kind of fascination / not exactly phobia, but intense fear of sharks. I'm weird like that, I guess. But yeah, I actually do have a nostalgic attachment to this figure for once. And I gotta say, despite the obvious limitations, and of course the fact that there are a lot of reuses of a lot of stuff that's been popular in Power of the Primes and Combiner Wars being reused here in terms of like engineering and stuff like that, I really like Rippersnapper, especially this beast mode. I mean, it's weird and goofy, it's a shark with arms and legs, but I really like how this looks. I love what they did with this, and it's seemingly nonsensical because, I mean, if you turn him, you can see, like, he's just sort of this box with a little shark tail at the end and a shark head at the top. But the way everything works, the posture that he has, the limbs, it comes together in a way that I am super into. I mean, first off, I do have that kind of love, scared, terrified relationship with sharks, but this just looks so good. I love the gray and blue color combination where you've got the primary center mass of the body is gray, whereas the limbs are this blue. It's a nice kind of back and forth, which actually makes it really easy to see what is essentially the shape of just like a regular shark, more or less, with like the blue just kind of being slapped on bits. But I love the shape that they got going here. I like the fact that he's hunched forward a bit more, whereas the G1 figure kind of stood up a bit more, so that kind of pronounced slope makes him look a little bit more monstrous, especially kind of from the front or from an angle. I actually like the arms here. I mean, yeah, these are just the robot mode arms, and it's a little bit distracting how he's got obvious robot mode fists there. I kind of wish there was some other way that this worked, like even if these rotated all the way around somehow, but it just doesn't really work out that way. But it's fine for what it is. But I particularly like these robot shark, these beast mode legs. I love this kind of overly pronounced backwards knee thing that they've got going here, and the clawed toes. And I like that they're on ball joints, so they get a little bit of splay, so when you put them down like this, it just looks quite intimidating in my mind, at least. I really, really like that. I love how he's just like this hunched shark monster. And I also like that they give you these kind of dual hinges for the shoulders here, so what I like to do is kind of push the shoulders up a bit to give him a bit more of a hunched monster look. And you don't have to, that's just what I like to do, but I like that that versatility is there, and I like what it adds to the shark mode. I do also kind of wish that there was a little bit more going on with the fin here. Like either if it was a little bit bigger or if it was like a different color, but it's, you know, it is what it is. It almost looks like there should be something that happens here because there's like a slot back here, but I don't think you can actually do anything with the fin. And the tail looks like a robotic shark tail. Yeah, I love the overall look and design of this monster shark beast mode thing, whatever you want to call it. Even just the simple guns on the shoulders. I do wish these weren't like plain blue plastic, like if they were painted a little bit, but you know, limitations. They are what they are. Now, in terms of the overall color scheme, like I said, I like the blue and gray. I think that looks good, and I like that there are little bits picked out here and there, like the eyes red, obviously. I like that the teeth are painted silver. That's really nice. They could have left those unpainted, but they didn't, and the monster mode is all the better for it. The robo gills are also painted, which is also nice. And then the fin is painted blue for some reason. I don't know why. I feel like the original figure, it was gray. Not that it necessarily needs to be, but I do kind of think that the blue was a mistake. But then you get some nice little silver, red, and yellow details here. A little bit of silver on the back here. It just kind of helps to break up that gray off-white color. On the underside here, this will see a little bit more of in robot mode, and I'll get into more detail about what I think about all this later. But yeah, there's some nice detail in there as well. And some yellow bits here, which will be the backs of the robot mode calves, and I like that they painted that as well, even though that's also not entirely necessary. But it adds a lot of visual interest to the beast mode, and the way that he angles, you don't see too much of that robot mode chest, really. It's more, like color-wise, your eye's kind of more drawn to that yellow, so I think that was, I guess, ultimately a good idea that they painted that. Also, this little door. It's normally up like that, and that's fine. For me, I prefer to flip it down in the monster shark mode, just to kind of further differentiate it from the robot mode. Again, not necessary. I don't think that's actually how they want you to do it in the instructions, but that's just what I do. Again, to differentiate the chest a little bit more in the monster shark mode. I really, really love this thing. Oh, actually, before I do the size comparisons, I also want to point out, I added some tissue paper to a few, or rather napkins, really, or paper towels to some of the joints, because this guy was quite loose out of the package. Nothing that couldn't be fixed, and if you're interested in knowing exactly what I'm talking about when I say I use paper towels to tighten the joints, you can check the link down below for the repair bay video where I go over how to fix loose ball joints and mushroom peg joints without using floor polish. But basically, because I ended up having to tighten the joints using paper towel, there are some spots where there's some white sticking through, and that breaks up the color a little bit. And it is a shame, particularly right here at the wrists, but it is what it is. And besides, if I really wanted to, I could go in there with like a pen or a Sharpie or something and just color the paper towel so that it matches a little bit better. I just haven't really bothered to yet. Anyway, that is that. So let's do some size comparisons here. So because Rippersnapper is a bipedal monster, I figured it would make sense to keep Dreadwind in his robot mode for the size comparisons, because I don't really think seeing how this sizes with a jet would really be all that helpful. So here you can get a more clear idea of how tall Rippersnapper is in shark mode as compared to a sort of typical modern deluxe. I mean, he's a modern deluxe too, but you know what I mean. We got to do these size comparisons one way or another, right? Anyway, he's a good size. I just, like I said, I like the way he kind of works in shark mode, the hunching, the limbs, the fact that you got a decent amount of spread. You can give him a pretty cool stance. I'm not bothered by the fact that he is maybe 2/3 the size, maybe closer to half the height, I guess, of a deluxe, because that's going to change. So yeah, I've already said this is my favorite mode for Rippersnapper. I don't dislike the robot mode, but this is just great. I love how this looks, and I think if it wasn't for nostalgia, I think I'd still be into this. But that's enough gushing about that. Let's take a look at the robot mode. And here we have Rippersnapper in his robot mode. With the exception of his thighs and the robot mode head, this is pretty much all stuff that was visible in the shark mode, but it still works, and it works really well. I'm pretty sure it was one of Emgo's videos on one of the Orden bots where he was talking about how people were complaining about the fact that they turned from monsters into like these really kind of mundane, regular-looking robot people. And I'm with Emgo on this. I think that's actually a really fun contrast, the fact that you've got these extremely monstrous alt modes that turn into relatively normal-looking robot modes. Though in Rippersnapper's case, there are a couple of exceptions, namely the enormous Wolverine-like claws coming off the backs of his hands. I like how this looks as well, and I think they did a good job of breaking up that gray further by including this blue in like the upper legs and pelvis section. So that way you've got blue, gray, and then blue around the sides as well. It just breaks it up nicely is what I'm saying. And looking at him from the side, you can see a little bit more of that backpack and other details, and it still works for me. I know that this giant shark head hanging off his back is possibly a bit unsightly, but it's accurate, and it doesn't really bother me. I think if anything, if you're going to have kibble hanging off your back, something like that is fine because it's interesting, and really it doesn't get in the way. I think it's alright. Now the head, I don't particularly have a problem with the head. I also don't really have any kind of nostalgia with Rippersnapper's robot mode face, so I feel like this is kind of a take it or leave it thing. I think it looks fine. I think the yellow for the face contrasts, or rather complements the blue pretty nicely. The red for the eyes doesn't stand out super well along the dark blue, but I still think it works. Yeah, I think it's a good sculpt. I really like this chest sculpt, though. I love the kind of nondescript robotic detail that they got going here, but I also like the fact that they got this black with these nice silver bits painted over top that. It's a really nice detail that just pops. I'm not entirely sure how necessary it is, but it's nice and it pops. And then I also like that they painted this down in here in the midsection. That blue kind of not quite matches the blue for the claws, but still gets the job done. And then you, of course, have a little bit more silver here, a little bit of red here. And then those details that were visible in the back of the shark mode are now the knee pads, and they work really well as knee pads. And also that silver detail there, which, of course, I think it's great that they got details that work prominently in both modes. These are kind of lost in robot mode because they're on the back of the calves now, but eh. And I didn't say this in the shark mode, but I like how they painted the shoulders red there. It just adds a little bit more color into the arm that's otherwise very blue all the way down until you get to the claws. So a decent color breakup on this guy, and it doesn't really bother me that his limbs are very, very blue. Because in robot mode, I think it works alright, and the blue kind of complements with the thighs, and yeah, it breaks up nicely. As far as the molding goes, it's again very similar to the robot shark thing. Not much going on the inside. The thighs they exist. There's nothing really fancy going on there, but it's nice molding. I kind of feel like they didn't need to paint as much of the torso as they did. Like, maybe not paint these and instead apply that paint somewhere else. Like, maybe break up the arms a little bit more, or break up the thighs a little bit more, but it's okay. Again, though, I kind of wish that they did something else with those guns. Yeah, I know these can come off and become weapons, which is great, but the thing is, they're the exact same blue as the arms, so when you put them in his hands, it just makes it look like he has longer arms that no longer have fists. So I kind of wish that they either painted those or made them out of a different color plastic. But regardless of whether or not they're in a different color, I am happy with their inclusion. I think they work well as like artillery, not artillery, but like shoulder guns for the monster mode, and they make an interesting visual detail in robot mode, or you can use them as guns, or if you don't want them to be sticking up, you can just spin them around so you don't have to worry about that, and I think that works quite well. I also actually was going to say I like how having the shark head as a backpack here works really nice in conjunction with the head, because when you're looking at him like this, you've got this nice off-white kind of background that kind of sits behind the head and really makes that head stand out. So even though we've got blue background, that head stands out very nicely thanks to the shark head that's sitting behind it. And now putting him next to Dreadwind, I'm not entirely sure how obvious this is, but Rippersnapper is just a tiny bit shorter at the head, which is fine. And I think the way his alt mode works, it makes that increase in height much more dramatic and obvious because, you know, you're going from a bipedal thing to another bipedal thing. That's kind of interesting looking at the way that the paint was divvied up between these two. There's a much higher concentration of paint in the torso and the knees for Rippersnapper, whereas with Dreadwind, it's kind of spread throughout and he gets more on the back. And I don't know, I just mostly wish that there was a little bit more paint going on Rippersnapper's arms there. But it doesn't really bother me. It's just, you know, if I'm really digging in and nitpicking, that's going to be one of the things that I'm going to nitpick. Strangely enough, despite the fact that he is intended to be a combiner limb, I think Rippersnapper is a really solid standalone figure. I'm really glad I got him, even just for him. Like I said, I wish some of the paint was distributed a little bit differently, and I kind of wish that there was a better way to hide the obvious robot fists in the monster shark mode, but I still really like this guy. Anyway, I think that is going to do it for Power of the Primes Rippersnapper. I will eventually probably end up doing a video on Hunger. I actually just got Hunger today, the day that I'm recording this, and haven't really had enough time to mess around with him to hone in my thoughts entirely. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, that said, great figure, very cool. That's enough about what I think. What do you all think? Do you have a preference? Robot over alt mode over robot mode? Does anyone out there with any nostalgic connection to Rippersnapper have an opinion one way or the other over either mode? Does anyone out there without any nostalgic connection to Rippersnapper want to chime in? I'm curious to know what people think when they don't have that background, because usually I come from that place where I don't have that connection to an old figure, but this is one of those few times where I can't ignore my my own nostalgic biases. And in terms of Abominus as a combiner, if anyone out there also has Orden, what are your thoughts in terms of the Power of the Primes figures as they compare to the Orden figures, specifically in this case Rippersnapper versus Albrecht? Because weirdly enough, despite the fact that I think Orden is the far superior combiner version of Abominus, I actually think, this sounds crazy I know, but I actually think that Rippersnapper is a better looking figure than Albrecht is. I think Albrecht ends up making a better limb in terms of the combine mode and all that, but I don't know, I like the transformation on Rippersnapper better, and I think Rippersnapper actually ends up looking better than Albrecht in both modes, because Albrecht is just kind of eh, but we'll get to that eventually. Regardless, whatever your thoughts, please feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all, and while you're at it, also feel free to like or subscribe. Any of those things would make me a happy Rob, and remember, art is more than meets the eye.